Hi, this is Tommy Ellison from Senior Moments Podcast. And today I've got a little bit of a program change in that I will not be live on camera today. A conflict in my schedule is preventing from me to be in the studio today live at 5. So I thought I would do something. Well, I guess the big networks do this as well. They run a rerun. And this is it for me on episode number 2, one that got the most views so far. And I thought I would just run it again and give you the opportunity to watch episode number 2. It was called Half Rubber. And as a matter of fact, if you would, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notify bell, and it'll tell you when I'm on the air live. And of course, hit the like button if you do like it. And if you don't like it, keep your hand in your pocket. Okay. All right. Here we go. Episode number 2, Half Rubber. It's a rerun from back then. Well, good afternoon. This is Tommy Ellison. We're coming live on Facebook and live on YouTube. So if you're watching live, we appreciate you being here with us. And welcome to Senior Moments, an opportunity for me to share some memories from my past and things that I'm trying to remember and recall, and things that just kind of come back to me. And episode today is referred to as Half Rubber. Well, in case you're wondering about the inspiration for this particular episode, it actually stems from a conversation that I was having with my pastor, my Sunday school teacher. And we were talking about, when we were kids and growing up and the things that we did, the things that we shouldn't have done. And the fact that kids today, have the internet and the PlayStations and all the manner of games and things that they tend to be involved with. But we didn't have that. We had a little bit more of a rudimentary childhood growing up, and I'm sure if most of you are watching that are my age, you will certainly remember some of these things. And by the way, if you'd like to make a comment, they will appear live, whether you're on Facebook or perhaps the YouTube channel. So if you do make a comment, I can bring them up on screen and we can talk about them, but we certainly welcome your thoughts and your comments as we process all this minutia from my past. So anyway, where I was going was to say that rather than having all this tech that I'm trying to manage now, we didn't have that. In fact, my Sunday school teacher, Wayne, he asked me if I ever remembered putting playing cards in the bicycle spokes of our bicycles and make them sound like motorcycles. And I said, yeah, I kind of do remember that. Although I think with my situation, we were actually putting playing cards in the spokes, something that kind of looked like this. And of course, when the wheels turned and the spokes caused the car to bend, it made a kind of a pata sound that, I guess would remind you of a Harley Davidson. It was old Harleys, that went potato, 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 potato. And although there were some other kids that I know that also used playing cards, baseball cards in the spokes of the wheels. And, we thought we were just cool kids, what it boiled down to. We were the cool kids trying to, make a name for ourselves in the neighborhood with these motorcycle sounding bicycles. And I can remember doing that. But I also remember doing bottle caps in the spokes of the bike. And I don't know if you guys remember that. I've asked somebody the other day, if they remember doing this that I'm about to talk to you about. It was putting the bottle caps in the spokes. And My dad owned a partial interest in a gasoline station with my half brother and his son. And I can remember being a kid, he would empty the Coke machine outside and get all the money out, and I would get all of the bottle caps out. And what we were doing with them, we were taking those old bottle caps from different, these are just some miscellaneous ones I found online, but he was taking those bottle caps, and we would take them and put them in the spokes of our bicycle wheels. I guess if you think about it, this was kind of like a forerunner to spinners that we see on some of the NBA and the NFL SUVs. Guys that are spending $50,000 for all those strange spinner wheels. And we didn't realize it at the time, but we were trotting new ground here, because you would take those bicycle spokes in the little intersections of the spokes, and you would insert one of those bottle caps. And we just thought we were super cool. Any of you remember that? Did y'all do that, or were we just unique in Fairfield where I grew up? I don't know. Anyway, we would get those bottle caps, and we would, just have a big time with them and put them in the spokes of our wheels. And between the bottle caps and the the playing cards or the baseball cards and the wheels, we just thought we were the cat's pajamas, whatever that means. I don't know that I ever knew exactly what that meant. But the real kind of backstory of this whole episode and being called Half Rubber was the game that we played in the park. Because what we would do, we would go around the neighborhood and we would collect empty bottles, empty Coke bottles, pop bottles, Pepsi bottles, and we would get a wagon, and drag them along behind our bicycles, and we would be going door to door, just essentially canvassing the neighborhood and asking people if we could have their old empty bottles. These were the old glass bottles. Kids today have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but if you're over 65, I know you probably do, and you may have even done it yourself. But we would take those bottles and go down to the A&P, and we would cash them in for money. And for those of you who did that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if my memory serves, that you could get about 3 cents for each bottle that you had. So if you had good luck, canvassing your neighborhood, and they had any left from the previous canvassing that you did, you could come up with $1 or $2. And of course, when we got that money, we would go uptown to the Elmore's 5 and Dime store, and we would buy a rubber ball. And Gene's come in here with me. He said they were 2 or 3 cents a bottle. That's what I remember too, Gene. About 3 cents. And anyway, we would cash them in, and then we would buy a rubber ball from the 5 and Dime. And with that rubber ball, we were able to play this game called Half Rubber. Now, the balls that we got, they just weren't any balls. They were like about 3, maybe 4 inches in diameter, and we would cut them in half. And so the art in pitching with this half rubber ball was you could wrap your finger around it, and if you had the right kind of control, you could pitch that ball in, and that ball would either be curving in, to the right or to the left to the batter, or if it would come in kind of like a slider would, where it would actually drop down. And some of you guys may remember playing this game, although I will be honest with you, I have surveyed, in my travels around the country, even internationally, I've oftentimes asked, did you ever play half rubber? And they look at you like, what? Excuse me? I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. But that's what this game was called. It was called half rubber because you used a half rubber ball. Now, the other piece of it was you would get an old broom from your mom's closet or, wherever you could find an old broom, and you would cut off the actual broom straw part. And so what you were left was a broomstick that was probably about 3 or 4 foot long, a little bit longer than an actual baseball bat. And that was the bat that you used when you tried to hit that ball. Now, the thing about it was, we would play at Fairfield Park. And Fairfield Park, had an old ice, it was a drinking fountain, but it was a big white, and people, if you Fairfield people remember this, you might remember that it had a big lid on it, and if you opened up that lid, I guess during the summer and prior to us being, on the earth when this thing was built, they would put ice in that thing to, I guess, refrigerate the water using ice. And when you looked in the big white chest, it was always had bugs and bug parts, and I always wondered, am I drinking that bug infested water? Because it was really just the water that was melted. It wasn't actually infiltrating the pipes that you were drinking the water from, fortunately, or at least not to my knowledge. But if it did, that would certainly explain some things with my development. But nevertheless, this big water fountain was where we played the game of half rubber. And the half rubber, there were rules and there were regulations. Gene says he had pallet balls. I'm not sure I remember it called by that name, Gene, but yeah, we also drank out of the hose pipe. That was a wonderful flavor of that hose pipe, was it not? But anyway, I digress. We had these things with the half rubber and the broomstick, and we played on. It wasn't a diamond because it wasn't a diamond shaped playing field. It was because it only had 2 bases. You had home base, and you had the other base, and it was about 40 foot apart, from one another, and typically, you mark that other base with some kind of, I guess, impromptu. It could have been a piece of paper. It could have been, a grocery sack, but something that marked that base, because you were playing a game that would kind of remind you of baseball, but it only had 1 base. So you had the half rubber ball on the equipment side. You had the broomstick, about 4 foot, long. The ball was probably about 4 inches in diameter. And then you had your teams. And typically you had a pitcher, and then you had a catcher, and then you had an outfielder that would be working the outfield, And because of the size of the field being what it wasn't a very big field, because you only hit the ball and ran probably 40 feet to the base, and then you were back home again. But the rules were a little different from baseball in that it was a real fast game, because if you swung and missed, you were immediately out. You didn't get 3 strikes. You were out, and the next batter from your team would come up. And each team would have those 3 players, the pitcher, the catcher, and the outfielder. And if you think about it, the outfielder had to cover not only what you would call right field, center field, and left field all at one time, but you weren't getting a lot of distance hitting this rubber ball to begin with. So it wasn't like the impossible dream trying to play that outfield position. The most important position was the pitcher, and of course the catcher being second. Now, if a guy swung and missed and the catcher dropped the ball, then it didn't count as a strike. There were no base on balls. There were no balls called and you got 4 and you would advance to the base. It was just a matter of whether you hit the ball or not. And it was a good game. It was a neat game. I know there's certain people that I've talked to over the years that grew up in Fairfield, a little older than me, a little younger than me, that remembered playing the game. But it was like baseball. You had 3 outs per team, and you played 3 innings. There were no foul balls. Any ball that was hit was in play. And, of course, the idea was to, the pitcher would cover the base while the outfielder took the play and tried to get it to the pitcher to cover the base before the runner, got there. And, of course, typically the outfielder wasn't quite as proficient throwing the ball as your pitcher was, so that ball could have gone anywhere, and it was a mess is what it was. There weren't any home runs. You basically went there and back and you scored. And of course you played the 3 innings and the games were over relatively quick because there was always usually another team that was, waiting to play the winner of this half rubber game. So anyway, it's a crazy memory. I know. You're probably asking yourself the question, what? What has this got to do with you? But nevertheless, it was just a memory that we had. Growing up, we lived on one occasion immediately across the street from Fairfield Park. And Fairfield Park used to be a really busy place during the summer because the church softball teams played there. The high school baseball team played on the baseball diamond. There were 2 diamonds in that park. There was the big baseball diamond, and then there was the softball diamond, which also doubled as a little league diamond. And some of you who grew up in Fairfield will remember that. All the churches were basically around that park. The Baptists, the Methodists, the Episcopalians, I said the Methodists. There wasn't a Catholic church. Closest Catholic church was probably in Ansley, Alabama. But anyway, it was a great place to grow up, and lots of memories, many of which I will be sharing on future episodes. So let's look at our comments right quick. Gene mentioned we had pallet ball, and he also says that we played kickball. We and a lot of girls in the neighborhood. Yeah, I know, Gene. You probably were the ladies' man that was more interested in playing with the girls than the guys. You're going to get me for that, aren't you? Gene is a member of my church and is a great singer, and we hold down the bass section in our choir. But we didn't play a lot of kickball. But I guess the greatest thing about half rubber was the fact that it didn't take a lot of money to play the game. You would cash in your bottles, buy a ball or 2. That ball could possibly last, a month or 2, unless somebody forgot to bring it to the park that day. But we were industrious. We raised the money. There was no NIL in half rubber. There was no transfer portal. But we were having a great time, and it was just one of my senior memories that I'm bringing you here today. And before we wrap up, if you enjoyed this episode of Senior Moments with me, please hit that subscribe button, and that'll let you know. And turn on the notifications too, because that'll let you know when the next episode is coming up. I don't want you to miss any. And if you really like what you've watched and heard today, a thumbs up on the comment would be appreciated, but only if you mean it. And if you didn't like it, well, just keep that thumb in your pocket, okay? So we'll see you next time for more Senior Moments. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the show. Well, hey, thanks for spending a few minutes with me on Senior Moments. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure and tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. I'll be back soon with more stories from a misspent youth, and maybe some of yours too.